multiplayer. Now, there is something that should be better taken care of in certain video games. Sometimes it's taken for granted, it's there, it's the standard shoot the other guys, it's a tacked-on, repetitive, uninteresting, made by Square Enix for Tomb Raider style multiplayer mode. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes, even when it's tacked on, even when it's glued to a game that doesn't need it, for which no one wanted it, can be good. And these are the top 7 unexpectedly great multiplayer modes. A show dedicated to all those times when a tacked-on multiplayer mode turned out to be actually good, or when a multiplayer mode of a game just astounded everybody. Where you sort of thought, yeah, it's gonna have multiplayer, it's gonna be nice maybe, and then it just flipped a switch in everybody's brain and they all went bananas. That being said, let's get it started with number 7. Aliens Colonial Marines is a bad game. It's trash. There's bits of it that are passable, but it's lame. I gave it a 5 out of 10 when I still gave grades, and I believe that 5 out of 10 is the highest score this game ever got. And I gave it a score mostly because the multiplayer wasn't that bad. Sure, it was janky as hell because it was made by Gearbox, who said, "Sod QA, we can let people test it and then pretend it was glorious and that there were no shenanigans and we didn't steal money from Sega." So you had things like your xenomorphs climbing on air, but the core of it I was fine with. It was basically Left 4 Dead with xenomorphs. It was AVP's multiplayer mode without the Predator. It was fun at times, it could be enjoyable. Were it not actually part of Aliens Colonial Marines, it could have been actually great, not tied to a steaming hulk of rotten flesh and disappointment. Sure, it wasn't what the original multiplayer mode of Colonial Marines was supposed to be, which was kind of a experience akin to Killing Floor, from what I remember in a preview from way long ago, but it was still good. Number 6. Command & Conquer Renegade. Now, people tend to be down on this game because it's a first-person shooter reinterpretation of an RTS. But you know what? It was actually good at its job. It kind of made you feel like you were one of those units. Yeah, sure, the enemies took forever to die sometimes, which was not really canonical. I mean, you were a commando, so you were supposed to kill them with one shot. Well, kinda did if you had a sniper rifle or a big enough gun, not just your pistols. But you know what really set this thing apart? It had a multiplayer mode where you played an RTS. You played an RTS from the perspective of a unit. You'd have your base would have its harvesters, they'd gather Tiberium, and then you'd use that to, well, buy weapons, buy upgrades, buy vehicles, and go to war and kill the enemy's base. You couldn't actually build additional structures like Hand of Nods and such other things, but you could buy yourself an ion cannon, a beacon I mean, and just sneak somehow into the enemy base and kill everybody. It was a lot of fun, and people are actually trying to remake this. Well, they've been trying to remake a form of Renegade that's Renegade X, with a multiplayer mode that's akin to what I just said, and a single player that is failing to find a reason for existing. Number 5. The zombie mode of Call of Duty. You know how Call of Duty is kind of crap? I personally realized it was crap with Modern Warfare 2. I know people love it. I thought the single player was the dumbest 4 hours I spent in a game, and that's only because Rogue Warrior was only 2 hours long, and the multiplayer was the exact same thing as all the other ones. But Treyarch, in the next game, or the one before, I don't remember exactly which, they started this thing with the zombie mode. First it was kinda janky and not all that interesting, but then it evolved. It became its own campaign, with its own maps, with giant robots, with stuff that was cool. And I kinda wonder, well, why isn't this the main game? Why is this separate? Why do you even try and make a single player campaign with your intelligent AI superfish and your light shafts that don't shaft from the sun and your stories that are absolute crap? And your gameplay that's just a follow the waypoint simulator? Why not focus on this? You've got Buffy in one of them. You can play as Buffy killing zombies. Why aren't you just doing this and sod the rest? Why? It kind of makes you wonder. I mean, it's not a bad game mode. It's stylized, it's intriguing, it's got excitement attached to it. Spooky, I know. I said excitement and Call of Duty in the same phrase, or context at least. I think I have to go lie down. Number 4. Splinter Cell's multiplayer. If you haven't played it, well, I haven't either, but I've seen it in action. I've seen people stream it back when streaming was really not a thing that people did. It was around 2008, 2009. I don't even remember the software being used, but I just saw an interesting concept of a game. 2 people play in first-person mode, they've got guns, they can shoot people, and they have to guard something. And 2 other players, they're playing Splinter Cell against them. They're in third person, they've got gadgets, they've got sneaking, and they've gotta reach the objective and do their thing without being shot. It's a wonderful idea for an asymmetrical game mode, and it actually kinda worked. And it was used, I believe, in several of the Splinter Cell games, of which I do actually own a few, but I never really got around to playing them because I kinda didn't like Splinter Cell. It was sort of like the worst part of Hitman, namely sneaking through enemy encampments, and it wasn't really as solid as Metal Gear. Get it? Because Metal Gear Solid was awesome, and the second one had mechanics, and the world, it was so goddamn real. It became crazy in its detail. But the core idea is that Splinter Cell, some of the games of the series, had really good multiplayer. Number 3, Watch Dogs, which was again kind of a crappy game. It was a major disappointment for everybody, but it did have one thing. It had that invasion hacking multiplayer mode, where someone could come into your game and hack you, and you had to stop them. But they weren't shown on the screen, they weren't there to kill you. They weren't there to just outright murder you, so they weren't being lit up like a red silhouette made of evil and get goodness. No, they were hiding. They were disguised as a simple NPC, and they had to keep that up in order to do their job. And it was so exhilarating. It was like hide and seek, but the person that was seeking you, actually the person that was hiding from you, had to be close to you to do their job. So it wasn't what is in Friday the 13th or Evolve, where you have to be on the other side of the map to have a chance to live. No, no, no. You had to be near them. You had to fake them out royally. Sure, the game had other multiplayer modes which were a lot less interesting, but that one was an absolute gem. A masterwork of design. Proof that at one time Ubisoft had some of the most creative people working on multiplayer. And nowhere was it seen more than in number 2, Assassin's Creed. Now sure, I'm actually talking about the people that made the ship and Bloody Good Time, because the last game was published by Ubisoft coincidentally around the time that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood came out, and it sort of had the same multiplayer mode, but Ubisoft's approach in Assassin's Creed was more action oriented, and that actually made it a lot more palatable, if I can say so, a lot more accessible to a lot more people. Not many people, mind you, because your basic mouth breather never understood what the multiplayer mode was about. They thought, well, you just run around the place and stab people, and run around roofs and you stab people for 100 points. That's what you do, right? Yeah, that's it. It sucks. No. That game was a superbly exhilarating multiplayer stealth game. You don't see that. Well, Ubisoft is the only company... No. Kojima did it with Metal Gear Solid 5, but it wasn't that good. So in essence, you don't see that. You don't see multiplayer-focused stealth games. You just don't. You don't sneak from NPCs. You don't hide from an AI. No, you are hiding from other players, and they are hiding from you, and it's not asymmetrical. It's all in the same rule set, in the same context, and you've got to stab as many people as you can in creative ways. You have to kill them with poison, you have to get them to expose themselves, you have to get into their heads, dig deep, and make them defeat themselves. And it's so goddamn rewarding and satisfying. I just cannot share with you exactly how much I love this multiplayer mode. This creation that came out of nowhere in a series that, let's face it, the first one was kind of bad. Yeah, the running was nice, the story was intriguing and incomplete, but it wasn't good. Second one, top-notch game. Third one, the second one again, but hey, multiplayer, and now you could ride a horse in town. I think you could do it in the second one too. But the multiplayer, it came out of nowhere and it wowed me. It wowed the people that got what it was about. It is a crime, an absolute crime, that they haven't reused that multiplayer mode and kind of try to kind of bork it even more. I mean, it's a Ubisoft game with Ubisoft servers and Ubisoft multiplayer structure, so there are no dedicated servers, no server browser, no ability to actually tell who's playing what mode and maybe how you can join them. But when it worked, it was amazing. When it worked. To their credit, they at least tried and fought to give you the option to customize your game modes, but with an infrastructure that was horrible and an interface that didn't really help much. And they also made the awful mistake of destroying their character identification. You couldn't really tell people apart anymore starting around 3. It was difficult. They did not have such a good definition. Well, actually it started with the DLC of Revelations, where some characters would have customization options that made them look a bit too much like other characters, and that kind of caused confusion, which was a shame. And the number one unexpectedly great multiplayer mode is Warcraft 3, Starcraft 2 and Dota 2. Why all these lumped together? Well, it started like this. Starcraft 1 had custom game modes, had scripting. You could do some things that could be interesting, some things that worked out well, they were fun. Warcraft 3 came along and it had so many mods, so many game modes made by people that were so creative that it redefined gaming for me and for many people. Dota wasn't the only one, there were hundreds. And they were all amazing, they were all creative, they were all so superb. They were phenomenal to play, they were exhilarating as hell, they were multiplayer that you could not find anywhere else. And you're getting the same thing now with StarCraft 2's arcade mode, which by the way is free. You can download the starter version of StarCraft 2, go on the arcade and try every mode made by any player ever. And also Dota 2 has the exact same thing, so you have these games that, yeah, they do have their multiplayer modes, their traditional ones, but the things that the community created, the imagination, the boundless enthusiasm, the ability to dream things so grand and so dim-wittedly, stupidly fun, that you cannot see this in a mainstream game. You cannot see this in a game being sold, because the industry is not set up that way. It's not set up for ideas like these to be funded, because they're not based on something that previously sold well. And sadly, not all those mods turned into gigantic phenomenons like Dota. Some of them were actually never seen again in most games. Well, Dawn of War 2 did have a final stand mode, which was highly popular back in Warcraft 3, but the other ones, the werewolf one, not the mafia one, but the werewolf, where you were a human by day, werewolf by night, you had to hide yourself, you had to collect resources, you had to pretend you were still a villager so you wouldn't be killed during the day by the other villagers, you had to implant the idea that someone else was the werewolf. This game was so complex at so many levels. And most of the mods were just as good, just as great. Well, not most of the mods, but a lot of them. Warcraft 3 still has the only great tower defense game, Elemental TD. There is no better tower defense game than Elemental TD. Stop trying to make them, you will fail every time to reach something that good in terms of quantity and quality. So just copy it. So closes this show about the top 7 unexpectedly great multiplayer modes and games that you sort of didn't expect to have them. One special mention I'd like to give is to the Arkham Origins multiplayer mode. Again, I didn't play it, but I heard some good things about it, and it's not playable anymore because Warner Bros. Is evil. So what's your favorite unexpectedly good multiplayer mode? What did you play and then realized, oh my god, this thing here stuck in a corner where nobody else can see it, this thing is the greatest thing ever. Why isn't anybody playing it? Please share in the comments. Goodbye.